The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the wooden shutters of a modest cabin nestled deep in the heart of the wilderness. Snow clung stubbornly to the pines, their branches sagging under its weight, and the world outside seemed wrapped in a suffocating silence, broken only by the occasional crack of ice splitting under its own weight. The cabin stood as a lone sentinel, its weathered logs and stone chimney a testament to human resilience against nature's relentless fury. Inside, the warmth of a roaring fire painted the walls in flickering shades of amber. The smell of fresh pine mingled with the faint aroma of coffee brewing in a dented steel pot. Sarah Calloway, a wildlife photographer by trade and an adventurer at heart, crouched by the hearth, coaxing the embers to life with practiced ease. Her hands were roughened from years spent braving the elements, her auburn hair tied back in a loose braid that framed her freckled face. Though solitude had worn away the sharp edges of her once vibrant personality, her green eyes still sparkled with a quiet determination. This cabin wasn't just a home, it was a sanctuary. After years of chasing deadlines and city noise, Sarah had traded the chaos of urban life for the unyielding beauty of the Alaskan wilderness. Here, every sunrise felt like a miracle, every shadow held secrets. She had learned to respect the land, its rhythms, and its dangers. Her days were spent capturing fleeting moments of wildlife, majestic caribou grazing under an endless sky, foxes darting through snowdrifts, and even the rare, elusive bear. Her daughter, Lily, was the anchor that kept Sarah grounded. At 5 years old, Lily had inherited her mother's curiosity and love for the wild. This morning, as storm clouds loomed, Lily sat cross-legged by the frosted window, her small face pressed to the glass. In her hands, she clutched a set of binoculars far too large for her, giggling every time the lenses fogged up from her breath. "Mommy, I think I saw a moose," Lily exclaimed, her voice a high, clear note of joy that seemed to chase away the storm's menace. Sarah smiled, joining her daughter at the window. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, thick and heavy. Tracks crisscrossed the clearing, a reminder of the unseen lives that wove through the forest. "That's not a moose, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, pointing to the distant figure of a deer cautiously picking its way through the snow. "Why is it so scared?" Lily asked, her brow furrowing. "Because it knows it's not the only one out there," Sarah replied, her tone soft but firm. "Predators are always watching." As she spoke, her gaze drifted toward the edge of the woods. There, just barely visible through the swirling snow, were paw prints, larger and deeper than any she had seen in recent days. A chill ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the unmistakable truth they revealed. Wolves. Close. Too close. "Come on, let's get some breakfast," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral as she guided Lily away from the window. The child protested but relented, skipping toward the kitchen table where a stack of pancakes awaited her. Sarah's mind, however, was elsewhere. She had seen wolves before, heard their mournful cries echo through the night, but they rarely ventured this close to the cabin. It wasn't just the storm driving them nearer, it was hunger. And hunger made even the most cautious predator bold. As she poured maple syrup over Lily's pancakes, Sarah cast another glance out the window. The forest was still, almost too still. In that moment, the wilderness seemed to hold its breath, as if anticipating what was to come. Unconsciously, Sarah reached for the rifle mounted above the doorframe. It was an old, reliable thing, more for peace of mind than actual use. She had never had to fire it, but the weight of it in her hands brought a small measure of comfort. For now, the cabin was safe. For now, the storm was the only thing they had to contend with. But deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the wilderness had more in store for them, a test, perhaps, or a reckoning. The wind howled again, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's cry joined it, piercing and mournful. Sarah's grip on the rifle tightened, her thoughts clouded by an unease she couldn't quite name. The wilderness was beautiful, but it was also ruthless. And in its icy embrace, survival was never guaranteed. The storm had grown fiercer by the hour, snow whipping against the cabin with a ferocity that sounded almost alive. The wind carried with it a symphony of eerie noises, trees creaking under the strain, the distant roar of avalanches on unseen mountainsides, and the occasional haunting cry of a wolf. Inside, the fire roared, and Lily had dozed off, her small frame bundled in a quilt on the couch. But Sarah couldn't rest. Her unease had grown steadily since spotting the paw prints that morning. She stood by the window, peering into the swirling white abyss. Shadows danced at the edge of the forest, barely distinguishable from the storm itself. She wasn't sure if her eyes were playing tricks on her or if something was really moving out there. Then it came, a sound so primal and heart-wrenching that it stopped her cold. A deep, guttural growl, followed by a frantic, high-pitched yelp. The sounds of a struggle. Sarah's stomach clenched as she strained to see through the storm. There was no mistaking it, something was out there, fighting for its life. Throwing on her coat and grabbing the rifle, Sarah stepped outside, the cold slicing through her like a blade. The snow was knee-deep, and every step felt like a battle. She paused at the edge of the porch, her breath clouding the air as she scanned the tree line. The sounds of the struggle had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. "Stay here, Lily," she whispered under her breath, though the child was still asleep. She moved forward cautiously, her boots crunching in the snow, the rifle a comforting weight in her hands. Then she saw it, a dark mass just beyond the clearing, writhing and jerking against the white canvas of snow. It was a bear. A massive creature with a thick coat, matted by blood and snow. The animal's movements were erratic, desperate, as it swiped at something smaller, a wolf. The predator circled, its sharp teeth bared, lunging at the bear before retreating with lightning speed. It wasn't alone. Two other wolves lingered in the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the injured bear. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She knew the signs of desperation in animals. The wolves were starving, their ribs visible even from a distance. The bear, likely a mother, was injured and outnumbered. Its labored movements and low growls told her it was protecting something. And then she saw them. Two small cubs, huddled against the base of a tree, their fur barely visible against the snow. They trembled with fear, their cries barely audible over the wind. The scene was brutal, raw, and unforgiving. The wolves darted closer, snapping at the bear's flanks. Blood stained the snow where the bear stood its ground, swinging its massive paws in a futile attempt to keep the predators at bay. Sarah's heart pounded. She had seen nature's cruelty through her camera lens many times before, but witnessing it like this, so close, was something else entirely. Her mind raced. This was the natural order of things, a brutal yet necessary cycle of survival. But could she really stand by and do nothing? The bear was outmatched, and the cubs didn't stand a chance if their mother fell. Yet stepping in would put her at risk. Wolves were intelligent, coordinated hunters, and they wouldn't hesitate to turn on her if they saw her as a threat. Sarah gripped the rifle tighter, her knuckles white. She had never fired it at a living thing before. The thought of taking a life, even to save another, twisted her stomach into knots. But as another desperate roar tore through the air, her resolve hardened. She couldn't let those cubs die, not like this. She stepped forward, the snow crunching loudly beneath her boots. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice breaking against the wind. The wolves froze, their heads snapping toward her. Their glowing eyes seemed to pierce straight through her, and for a moment, the forest was deathly still. Then one of the wolves growled, a low, menacing sound that sent chills down her spine. Sarah raised the rifle, her hands trembling as she aimed it above the pack and fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the gun echoed through the clearing, and the wolves scattered, their sleek forms disappearing into the trees like shadows. The bear collapsed onto its side, its breaths heaving. Sarah approached cautiously, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The cubs, sensing the immediate danger had passed, scampered to their mother, nuzzling her with tiny, pitiful cries. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes. The bear was gravely injured, its thick fur hiding wounds that bled freely into the snow. She knew it wouldn't survive the night without help, but what could she do? Taking the bear and her cubs to the cabin was unthinkable, yet leaving them here, exposed to the elements and other predators, felt just as cruel. Sarah's mind raced with options, each more implausible than the last. In that moment, she felt the weight of the wilderness pressing down on her, the unforgiving laws of survival, the fine line between life and death. She thought of Lily, warm and safe back in the cabin, and how she would explain her decision to her daughter one day. Could she tell Lily she had tried, even if it wasn't enough? Or would she live with the knowledge that she had walked away when she could have made a difference? The bear's labored breathing and the cub's frantic whimpers shattered her thoughts. Time was running out. Sarah knelt in the snow, her fingers brushing against the icy fur of the cubs as they huddled close to their mother. "I'll figure this out," she whispered, more to herself than to the animals. "I have to." With trembling hands and a resolve born of desperation, Sarah began to work. She stood frozen in the storm, the rifle still clutched in her trembling hands. The bear lay motionless except for its shallow, labored breaths, while the cubs pressed against their mother's bloodied side, their tiny bodies trembling with both cold and fear. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, the urgency of the moment weighing down on her. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of thoughts, each more paralyzing than the last. What am I even doing? This is insane. If I bring them closer, I'm putting Lily at risk. But if I leave them here? She swallowed hard, her throat tight with indecision. The bear had fought so valiantly for its cubs, and now it lay defenseless, its life slipping away with each passing second. Her gaze darted back to the forest, half expecting the wolves to reappear, their hunger drawing them back to the wounded prey. The storm would cover their approach, she wouldn't even hear them coming. They'll be back, and they'll finish what they started. But it wasn't just the wolves. The storm itself was merciless. The bitter cold was already stiffening Sarah's fingers and biting through her layers. The cubs wouldn't last long out here, exposed to the freezing wind and snow. And without their mother, their chances of survival were non-existent. Her breath came in shallow gasps, visible in the icy air. She glanced toward the cabin, barely visible through the swirling snow. The warm light spilling from the windows felt like a taunt. Safety and comfort were so close, yet the decision before her made it feel unreachable. If I take them in, I'll be risking everything. The thought of Lily flashed through her mind, her sweet, curious daughter who relied on her for everything. She had told herself from the beginning that Lily came first, that nothing in this wilderness mattered more than her safety. And yet, here she was, considering opening their sanctuary to a wounded bear and its cubs. The risks were staggering. If the bear recovered enough to feel threatened, it could turn on her or Lily. Even the cubs, though small, were wild animals, unpredictable and possibly dangerous. But then her gaze fell back on the cubs, their wide, terrified eyes staring up at her as if they understood the stakes. They made tiny, mewing sounds, huddling closer to their unconscious mother. They weren't dangerous. They were helpless. And they needed her. Her internal dialogue spiraled, each argument clashing against the next. "I'm a mother too," she realized. That thought struck her like a bolt of lightning, electrifying her resolve. If Lily were out here, scared and vulnerable, wouldn't I hope someone would fight for her? Her jaw tightened as she made her decision. It wasn't about logic anymore, it was about doing what felt right. Her heart screamed at her to act, even if her mind warned her against it. "You can't save everyone," she whispered, almost pleading with herself. But even as she spoke, she knew she wouldn't turn away. Sarah set the rifle against a tree and knelt by the bear. Up close, the enormity of the task became clear. The bear's chest heaved with effort, its thick fur matted with blood that had begun to freeze in the frigid air. Its eyes fluttered open briefly, and Sarah froze, waiting for a sign of aggression. But the bear's gaze held no hostility, only pain and exhaustion. "It's okay," she murmured, though her voice trembled. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to the bear or herself. Gently, she reached for the cubs. They flinched at first but didn't resist as she picked them up one by one. Their small bodies were impossibly light, yet they felt like the heaviest burden she'd ever carried. Step by agonizing step, she trudged toward the cabin, her boots sinking into the snow. The cubs squirmed in her arms, their tiny claws scratching at her coat. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the cold burning her lungs. But she pushed forward, driven by the singular thought, get them to safety. Reaching the porch, she set the cubs down gently, their small faces peeking up at her in confusion. She turned back toward the bear, her heart sinking at the sight of its unmoving form. It looked impossibly far away now, a massive shadow against the white expanse. For a brief moment, she considered leaving it there. "The cubs will be safe with me. That's enough, isn't it?" But she knew it wasn't. The cubs wouldn't survive without their mother's warmth and presence. Even if she fed and sheltered them, she couldn't let them lose her. With a deep breath, Sarah grabbed a tarp and a sled she used for hauling firewood. It was makeshift at best, but it would have to do. The process of moving the bear was grueling. Every inch of her body screamed in protest as she rolled its massive weight onto the top. Snow soaked through her gloves, numbing her fingers, and her muscles burned with the effort of pulling the sled. The storm fought her at every step, the wind pushing her back as if trying to dissuade her, but she refused to give up. When she finally reached the porch, she was gasping for air, her body trembling with exertion. She dragged the tarp as close to the door as she dared, then went inside to grab a pile of blankets. She created a makeshift shelter on the porch, layering the blankets over the bear and the cubs. The porch offered some protection from the storm, and the blankets would trap enough heat to keep them alive through the night. As she worked, she felt a strange calm settle over her. She'd made her choice, and though the risks hadn't disappeared, she no longer felt paralyzed by fear. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to hope. When she finally stepped inside, the warmth of the cabin wrapped around her like a long-lost embrace. Lily was still asleep on the couch, her small face peaceful and untroubled. Sarah sank into a chair by the fire, her body aching but her heart lighter than it had been in hours. The storm continued to rage outside, but Sarah no longer felt its weight. She'd done what she could, now it was up to the wilderness to decide the rest. The storm finally passed in the early hours of the morning, leaving a hushed stillness in its wake. The snow outside was pristine and glittering, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the night before. Sarah stirred on the couch, her body aching from exhaustion, but her mind immediately snapped to the makeshift shelter on the porch. She wrapped herself in a heavy coat and stepped outside, her breath catching at the sight. The bear was still alive, its chest rising and falling in slow, steady movements. The cubs were curled against their mother, their small bodies nestled into the warmth of the blanket Sarah had layered over them. Relief washed over her, so intense it left her momentarily lightheaded. One of the cubs lifted its head, blinking groggily at her before letting out a small, plaintive cry. It was as though it recognized her as part of their survival. Sarah knelt beside them, reaching out tentatively. The cub sniffed her hand before nuzzling into her palm, its tiny warmth seeping into her skin. Tears pricked her eyes, unbidden and unstoppable. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. The bear shifted slightly, its massive paw brushing against one of the cubs. It opened its eyes briefly, meeting Sarah's gaze. The moment was fleeting, but in it, she felt a profound connection, a silent understanding between two mothers. Sarah had done her part. Now it was up to the bear to do hers. Over the next few days, Sarah nursed the bear back to strength. She melted snow for water, brought scraps of food to the porch, and watched from the window as the cubs grew more curious and playful. Lily, of course, was fascinated, her wide eyes glued to the scene outside. "Are they going to stay with us forever?" she asked one afternoon, her voice full of wonder. "No, sweetheart," Sarah replied with a smile. "They belong out there, in the wild. But for now, they're our guests." As the bear regained its strength, it began to stand more easily, its wounds healing thanks to Sarah's care. One morning, Sarah opened the door to find the blankets left untouched, the small family was gone. Tracks led away from the cabin into the forest's depths. A bittersweet ache filled her chest, relief mingled with a sense of loss. They had survived, and that was enough. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the experience. The wilderness, with all its beauty and brutality, had tested her in ways she'd never imagined. She had always thought of herself as a mere observer, documenting nature's cycles through her camera lens. But now, she felt irrevocably tied to it, a participant in its story. She found herself watching Lily with a renewed sense of gratitude, the way her daughter's laughter rang through the cabin, the way her tiny hands reached for Sarah's when they walked outside. These moments felt sharper, more vivid, as if the storm had stripped away the noise of life and left only what mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the snow in shades of gold and pink, Sarah stood on the porch. The rifle still hung above the door, untouched since that fateful night. She knew she'd likely never need it again. The wilderness wasn't a place to be tamed or conquered, it was a force to be respected, something she now understood on a level that words couldn't capture. Somewhere in the distance, a low growl rumbled through the forest, followed by a higher-pitched yelp. Sarah smiled. She imagined the bear and her cubs thriving, stronger and more resilient because of the bond they'd shared for those few brief days. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the crisp air. She felt different, stronger, more connected, and deeply humbled. The wilderness had changed her, not with its beauty, but with its demands, its reminders that life was fragile and precious. And in that, she found something she hadn't even known she was searching for: peace. As the last light faded, she turned back toward the cabin where Lily waited, her small face pressed to the window. They had weathered the storm together, and they were stronger for it. Compassion, Sarah realized, wasn't just a virtue, it was a choice. A decision to act, even when it was easier to walk away. And sometimes, it made all the difference. The door clicked shut behind her, the warmth of the fire wrapping her in its embrace. Outside, the snow glittered like 1,000 tiny stars, a reminder of the world's infinite beauty and its unyielding challenges. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of survival, compassion, and connection with the untamed wilderness. If this heartwarming story moved you, imagine the countless other tales waiting to be discovered, stories of bravery, love, and the unbreakable bond between humans and wildlife. We invite you to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring wildlife adventures. By hitting that subscribe button, you're not just staying connected to these touching moments. You're also helping us continue to share stories that highlight the beauty and resilience of nature. Your support allows us to bring these authentic experiences to light, inspiring others to cherish and protect the world around us. Every like, share, and comment makes a difference, enabling us to reach more people who, like you, care deeply about the planet and its incredible creatures. Together, we can celebrate the power of compassion and the importance of living in harmony with nature. Don't miss out on the next chapter of these unforgettable journeys. Subscribe now and become a part of our growing community of wildlife enthusiasts. Let's make a difference, one story at a time.